Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it anywhere and everywhere. You can even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works.
Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today.
Then you can go ahead and distribute your podcast to Spotify and anywhere else podcasts are heard.
Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take the conversation with your fans to the next level, Q&A polls are the best way to get them talking.
With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions.
And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. We've been using Spotify for Podcasters, and we highly recommend you give it a try. Download Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters and get started.
All right, everybody, welcome back to That's So Fringy podcast. I'm Rick.
Kristen.
And I'm Bethany.
And we are here with our new friend, Drew. He's from a little bit farther away than what we're used to talking to. He is from Australia, and he reached out to us to do a podcast together, and we are just so happy to have him on. Drew, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing on your podcast. You're Missing the Point, and just, tell the people about you a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. This is great, just being able to collaborate with people all around the world and get our voices out there a bit more. I run a podcast called You're Missing the Point, play on my last name, Missen. It was my way of kind of giving myself the opportunity to speak out when I thought there wasn't really a great opportunity in Australia to do so. We went through the whole lot of COVID measures, which I'm sure most Americans are kind of aware of. And after the lockdowns, air quotes, kind of ended, people went back to life as normal and kind of just refused to ignore the elephant in the room. So for me, the podcast has been more of an ability to speak to people around the world, speak to Australians who are willing to talk about it. It's been almost like a self-treatment for myself and my mental health, just to be able to talk about these things that you can't traditionally talk about around the water cooler at work without being looked at like you've got two heads.
Yeah. Every time you step out of the matrix, you become this weird organism running around, and nobody really wants to have anything to do with you because you might just bring up something crazy. We get that for sure over here. I've been dealing with that for a long time. So when you started the podcast, was your mission just to have conversations, or was it to try to wake people up to the draconian lockdowns and those type of things?
More so just have conversations. It was, COVID, we were locked down for nearly 2.5, 3 years at one point. And Victoria, where I am, we're the most locked down place in the world. So during that time, I've always kind of been that conspiracy-minded person who love to read about UFOs and Bigfoot and Nessie, all the basic type of tropes of conspiracy theory. So I was always looking at YouTube videos, and I really started to get stuck into podcasts at that time. And I started to listen to the likes of Deborah Gets Red Pilled, Union of the Unwanted, Our Big Dumb Mouth, those types of podcasts. Sure. And it kind of evolved into the idea of, these people just seem like the average person having a conversation. Why can't I do that? So for me, it was just contacting people that I like listening to, that I would love an opportunity to talk to, and starting those conversations more than anything else.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I've really enjoyed some of those conversations that you've had. I've been listening to the podcast, and you're doing a really good job. We commend you for being brave. That's people have a hard time these days being brave. We fall into this fear mongering propaganda machine, and we get so caught up in all the fear that we just do whatever they tell us to do, right? And so, congratulations for being one that is willing to be brave in this time of people just living in fear.
Yes, it's the idea. I think a lot of podcasters probably initially go through those first few stages. They put a couple of episodes out, and that niggling feeling about what's the social repercussions going to be? What will people in my town think about me if they find out about this? And I had that feeling for a little while, but then, you get people contact you who listen to you that genuinely get something out of listening to the show, and it helps them in some small way, or it helps reinforce the things that they've been thinking about that they didn't know other people were talking about. So if we can't have conversations with people in our own communities, we need to broaden that horizon and find communities through the digital age. Like, we've got one of the greatest forms of technology for communication ever, and we need to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people also, like, you have this conspiracy-minded people, and then you have these, like, Christian people, and they don't think that they can meld together very well. And I'm over here like, wait, why can't I be both? Why can't I like Bigfoot and also like Jesus? It's like this. Why do those have to be so separated? I don't know, but they are.
Yeah, it's the same thing with politics. That you have someone who talks about politics, someone, like you said, talks about faith, or someone who talks about conspiracy. But it's an all interconnected web, which somewhere along the lines there's a connection there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's fun to tease it out. Some people just get frustrated with us and how we just are boldly saying what we're saying, but the reality is we're not saying definitively that we know everything. What we're saying is that we've done a lot of research, and we've taken a lot of time out of our own lives to look and to find things that are important to us. Things like our children, and how they're being treated at school, and what type of knowledge they're getting. And is it enough? Are we really this low in the nation for our schools? And why is that? And what can we do to make it better? These asking questions and getting into people's minds and trying to tease out, like, what is it that you believe, and why do you believe that? And what is it that keeps us from having these conversations? Because it's almost like there's a switch that goes off in somebody's head when you start to talk about something that's outside of the realm of, as you said, normal conversation by the water cooler, where you can talk about the weather, that's acceptable. You can talk about what's going on internally in your job, those type of things. But if you start dropping bombs on people, they're just like, what? No, you believe that? I can't even. But there's this mindset that we have to get into, that not everybody believes the same things that you believe. And that's why we're excited to have you on, because you have a whole different perspective than an American would. And we have a lot of Americans listening to our podcast, but we do have some Canadians, some Australians, some people from all over the place. And we want to get more of a worldly perspective, because we know that all of this conspiracy stuff that we talk about doesn't happen just in America, obviously. This is a worldwide thing of control. And we're beginning to pull back those layers and see that it's a lot bigger than we initially thought.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just isolated to any one geographical region in the world. It's all interconnected. It's so multifaceted. And I think the last 3 years has really proved that Australia tends to be the canary in the coal mine, the testing ground for broader agendas in the world. And going back to what you said about, you can't have these types of conversations in polite, normal conversation at all, because the system's done a really good job at, like the saying, you don't talk about religion or politics at the dinner table. That's just like an unspoken rule people just grow up with. And, and if you can't discuss these really important topics that drive education, that drive politics, that drive religion, all aspects of society, we're not doing ourselves any favor by not talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we begin to make ourselves into all of these boxes where you're allowed to be my friend because you believe what I believe, and we become tribal. And when you become tribal, then you become separated from the other people that don't believe what you believe. And the division is really causing, I'm finding, just talking to people throughout my regular day, the division is really being ramped up. It feels like, where you almost have to pick a side at this point, which is scary to me. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s. Now, I don't know if you were around a similar age bracket, but can you remember in the 90s, the left was all about not giving people labels? Like the idea of the left in itself as a label, but I find it quite funny that we have labels put on people more now than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I was listening to a rapper the other day who was making the connection with, he's a black gentleman, and he was making the connection with the black community and how they're starting to make a lot of the trans community coupled with the black community and the struggles that they've been through and all those things. And those same struggles are now being put onto the trans people as if it's the same thing. Like they're kind of going through the same thing. And you're just like, wait a minute, this is not the same thing. These guys have been through a lot. And you guys just kind of came on the scene out of nowhere and decided that this is your movement. You don't get to connect the two, but they're doing that. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but it's happening all over the place.
Yeah, there always has to be a victim class by the looks of it. And, you know, history has had its dark points, and we know that there was a civil rights movement across most of the Western world. It was predominantly happened in the United States first and then kind of spread throughout the rest of the Commonwealth, countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK. So we saw that, like, legitimate, real grassroots movements for equity, freedom, all that type of stuff. But then it kind of applied that same kind of methodology because I would say the left-leaning sphere of politics is built around having a victim. To begin with, it was the victim of the working class. The working class weren't getting their rights met too. So, you know, the union movement sprung up. Then it became racial. And then it became gender-based, so women getting rights. And then it became gay rights. And now we're going down what you can only equate to like being a slippery slope. Like people said in Australia when we had our vote on whether gay couples should be allowed to marry, the argument from the right side of politics was this is leading down a slippery slope for other things. Like gender ideology, all the things that we were told is fringe conspiracy theory or fringe right-wing politics is happening today. Like that victim mentality, they're placing the mantle of victim on different subgroups, which is just another way to divide society.
Yeah, and it's gross, and it is a slippery slope. I mean, in my estimation, once you start doing that, then anybody can be a victim. You can make anybody. I mean, you can make a recording artist who makes a ton of money, who never has a worry in the world. You can make them a victim, and you're just like, what? How are they a victim? Like, what are they a victim of? They're not doing anything. They're living their best life, in my opinion. And now, we are supposed to think that they're a victim, that they're living in hardship because somebody didn't like the clothes that they wore, or they had an agenda that we didn't like. So now they're a victim. I just don't understand how we've gotten to that place where everybody can't just be okay with the fact that people are different and that there's a lot of differences in the world, and that, you get on a plane to fly anywhere and that whole thing is full of a bunch of people that think a ton of different ways. And we have to learn how to come together and have conversations with each other about the hard things, not just the easy stuff, the hard stuff, because that's what makes character. That's what shows people what your true character is.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
We saw that in the 90s, particularly with young girls and young boys, I might add, that in the 90s, there was a lot about body positivity, like being comfortable in your own skin. We know there was a lot of stuff going around about eating disorders and things like that. So a lot of social work and societal and cultural work went into, people come in all different shapes and sizes. You are who you are. Find who you are and be happy in yourself. There might be things you can change. That's okay, like through exercise or getting a haircut or whatever. Small things you could change, but overall you have to be comfortable in who you are. And in the space of 10 years, in the start of the noughties, the thousands, that we start to saw that gender ideology happen, where if you're not happy with your gender, you can fundamentally change who you are by cutting body parts off. And that seems just polar opposite to the messaging we got when we were younger about being happy with who you are.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me, my parents always taught me to basically do whatever I wanted to do, but be kind to everyone. Be kind to everyone. And it was kind of that small town mentality where, like, I know if somebody is going to see me do something crazy, my mom's going to find out about it. And that's a bad thing. We do not want mom to find out about the crazy stuff Rick's doing behind the scenes. So you have to realize that there's some sort of accountability that needs to be placed on people to where there has to be good and there has to be evil. We have to draw those lines, and we have to all come to the point where we can agree on what good and evil is. And I think the majority of the world, and I might just be speaking for myself, but I think the majority of the world thinks that like child molestation and messing with children is just bad, like all across the board. But then you find out that there's a lot of people that don't think that they actually think that they're attracted to minors and they should be allowed to do that. And I don't understand that, because I grew up in a different place, but I try, to allow my mind to go to a place of like, how could a person be this way? And how could they be attracted to minors? How could they? And I just can't find it. I just can't find it in my mind where there's a path to that, if that makes sense.
It's the corruption of the moral framework. And like, some people might be religious and some might not be, but it's pretty evident just by looking at the track record. As soon as, particularly in Australia, as soon as they started removing religious education from public schools, we saw a moral framework start to degrade. Like, everyone has their own scope of morals. My morals look very different from someone else's. At one point, society had a collective moral framework that everyone kind of adhered to. There was at least a base level, a foundation that was all built upon. Now we're seeing people justify their actions through their own skewed moral framework. So an example like that might be just a political one: punch a Nazi. My moral framework is assault's assault, and really violence only comes into it if you're protecting yourself. So if you're actively going out of your way to punch someone based on their political beliefs, whether you disagree with them or not, morally I think that's wrong. You throw into that anyone who disagrees with the transgender ideology that comes through is a TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist. So women who are standing up for women's rights are now being hounded by the far left for being bigoted and hateful. That is a skewing of the moral fabric around protecting women's rights. So we're seeing that moral code degrade over time exponentially, and I don't think it's going anywhere pretty, because it's sowing greater and greater
you
division.
See this. Right. You see this whole thing with the trans agenda, especially with like the drag queen things and all of that you see, where I see it as like they're making fun of women. Like they're literally dressing up like borderline like clowns and dancing around like doing ridiculous things. Like how do women think, like how do they make in their mind have that make sense? Like, yes, go drag queens, and I'm over here like they're making fun of us.
It's woman
when
face,
they boil
right?
it down to its most basic form, they're making fun of us.
Yeah, they're putting woman face on. It's like the modern day version of blackface. It's a mockery, and so much so that they never dress as just a woman wearing a sundress, just going about her day. It's always hypersexualized, and that kind of gets to the crux of what I think it's really about.
Sure. I mean, if you're talking about blackface and all that stuff, it's like that's an outrage, right? Cultural appropriation is an outrage, but men can dress up as super sexualized women, and that should be fine. And not only that, but they should be able to twerk in front of your children, and you should be okay with it. And I'm just like, I don't see it. I'm not making the connection. I don't understand why you have to have children at the bars for you to dance for. Like there's been plenty of news articles and things that people have been outraged about, rightfully so, in my opinion, where these people have been dancing in front of children. They've been invited in to have a show for children. And I'm just like, if this is something that you want to do on your own time, then do it. I don't have a problem with what you're doing. The problem I'm having is that you're inviting children in, and now you're telling children that at a very young age, they can make the decision to choose who they want to be, whether they want to be male or female. And that's just asinine to me. It doesn't really make any sense, because they're not allowed to drive. They're not allowed to join the army. They're not allowed to do anything. I mean, most of them can't even barely, do math yet at a high level. And you're telling us that they can make a decision for themselves that is going to echo throughout the rest of their lives. There's children that are I've learned recently it's called an upper. They're getting an upper surgery done, and they're completely scarring themselves for the rest of their lives. And I'm just like, this is not a decision that children should make.
And not only that, but here in America, and I'm pretty sure in Australia there too, they're trying to pass legislature where if you don't support that as a parent, they can take your kids from you.
Well,
Like it's child abuse if you don't let them do that.
I can give you a first-hand example. That essentially exists in my state already. My state seems to be the testing ground for the rest of Australia, and like I said, Australia becomes a testing ground for the rest of the world. Within my state, the medical system and the educational system has an affirming care model. So if a child presents and says, I think Jimmy says, I want to be Josephine, we have to affirm that. We can't deny that child's how they feel, air quotes. The problem is that within our school system, if a child does that, says they want to be Josephine and not Joe, the teacher, if the child says, I don't want my parents to know, the teacher is legally bound to not tell the parent. If we do so, we're breaking the law. So much so that if an agreement between parents can't be reached and the child does want to go through gender-affirming care, including medical, what can happen in our state is a teacher who has the greatest relationship, air quotes, with that student can become the caretaker for medical choices. And then the state takes over and actually helps that child transition, including up to hormone replacement and surgeries. So we're literally seeing in our state the rights of parents literally being taken away. Kids getting taken away from families within their medical choices.
I can't, man. It's just... I don't know. We have children, you know. I don't know if you have children. We have a small child, and sometimes he doesn't want to go to bed. And so we make him go to bed because we know that the outcome is that he's going to be exhausted and he's not going to be able to do his schooling the next day. He's not going to be able to do all the activities he's doing tomorrow. That's not even in the realm of possibility of being harsh or mean. This is us parenting and leading him down a path of taking care of himself and making right choices. And now we're saying that the same children that don't want to go to bed or don't want to do their homework or don't want to eat their vegetables, now they can choose whether they want to be a boy or a girl. It's just like, I just don't think we're thinking it through. And at that same point, I'm thinking this has to be an agenda. It has to be, because it's so dumb. That's how you know it's an agenda. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't.
But people spend so much time and effort trying to justify why it makes sense. And they just talk in circles. They're like, well, it's because this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And then we're back to where we started. And none of it makes any sense. And your head's just like, wait a second.
Yeah,
what did we
the
just
mental
say?
gymnastics of it just astound me. And they go about their reasoning. And then all of a sudden you've got kids who identify as cats and there's kitty litters in classrooms. Sorry, the argument's kind of destroyed. As soon as you got kids identifying as animals and we're affirming that, it's too far gone. If that was applied to me when I was a kid, as a kid, I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, Sylvester Stallone. I thought I was going to be an action hero. So by their very own argument and metric, I should have been put on steroids at that age and should have been in the gym 12 hours a day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. It's a wild world out there. And this is why we like to have conversations, because this isn't a bad thing to ask questions about what we're actually doing, because as you just said, this is actually happening in your state. And this isn't just like something that's on the ballot. Like, this is something that's actually happening. How is that being received over there?
Mine is a very left-wing state. 6.5 million people in my state for population. A little over 5 million of that live within the city of Melbourne, our capital. The regional areas tend to vote conservative, like a lot of American states. It tends to be the big cities that vote blue vote left-wing, and the country areas that vote conservative. So these conversations are only kind of happening on the fringes of cities. In the cities, they are so woke, so with the plan, that they're going for it full steam ahead. They're putting the pedal down and they're just going to ride this thing out until people get hurt. The danger I see out of all of it is that at the end of the day, all we're doing to that we're doing, I shouldn't say that, what the system is doing to these kids is that it's removing the potential of life through poor decisions early on. If it was just about affirming the gender and saying, okay, my kid wants to be called Josephine, and that was it, and they want to dress in girls' clothes, I can understand that to a degree. But as soon as you start getting into the realm of hormone replacement surgeries, that child is sterilized for life. That child has been robbed the potential of being a mother or father. That person has been robbed the chance of having a fulfilling, meaningful relationship if they change their mind. Could you imagine a girl who goes through top surgery, takes testosterone, then changes their mind later in life? They're always going to look somewhat masculine. They won't have breasts. How is that young girl going to have a meaningful relationship with a normal average man? The odds are stacked against them at that point.
And the confusion that goes along with it. Like, I mean, I remember I've always liked sports. You know, we watch football. We're a very sports family. We played sports. Like, I never wanted to be a boy. I just liked, like our church has a women's retreat where it's like, okay, you can go, and they have shopping, and they have, you know, and then they have a men's retreat, and they go and they have like fishing, and they shoot guns, and they eat prime rib, and I'm like, I'd rather go to the men's retreat. Like I would rather do that than go do the women's thing. But that doesn't make me a man. That doesn't make me want to be a man. That just means that I like doing these activities as opposed to, you know, like Rick's not going to a spa day with me to get a pedicure. That's just never going to happen. So, which is fine because I don't want to do that. But they change it in your mind when you're young and impressionable, and they make you take the things that you're naturally good at or that you naturally like, and they're like preying on it almost. Like they're just, I don't know, like predators. Like, no, you like basketball, so you should probably be a boy.
Yeah, I think they're conflating personality types and interests with gender. Like a girl can be a tomboy.
Yes.
They can love working on cars. They can love riding bikes, all that type of stuff. They're still a girl. A boy can be very attuned to the arts and like doing more intricate, small detail things and can like fashion. Doesn't mean they're a girl. You're actually seeing the big division, which they're calling the Great Divorce within the alphabet community. The lesbian, the gay, and the bi people want to distance themselves from this because they, on their own ideas, they think that children who would normally have identified as being gay or lesbian are being targeted and forced to go into another gender based on the way that they present themselves personality-wise. So when you see the left starting to eat itself alive in this regard, not that I think it's really a left or right issue, there's something up. There's definitely something up with this. It's more than a natural progression of the way society's going. So much so that in Australia, over 30% of students from years 7 to 12, so senior years, identify as non-binary now. 30%. That is a massive uptick that just doesn't make any sense at all.
No, and it builds confusion in the child's own mind. You know, we talked a lot on our last episode about, because we were talking about Tartaria and knowing kind of where we are in the world and how the timelines have been changed. Well, that stuff kind of same thing is happening in the mind of these children, where it's like it's not timeline now, it's gender fluidity, to where you don't actually know what you are. You don't know where you belong in the world. And you look around and you see women's clothes and men's clothes at a department store, and you don't know which one to go to because you're not the same. Yeah. And you're trying to find your way in the world, but they've made your path so confusing. And now you're almost weird for not, you know, like if you go to high school or whatever, you're weird for not being on board with all this stuff and affirming it in your friends and affirming it in all of these things. And the flags are plastered everywhere. It's just like, at what point do we say, this isn't about this schooling? This isn't about gender. This is about learning. Like, I thought we were here to learn about math and science and English, all of the things that we are usually supposed to learn about. But all of a sudden, it's been completely derailed. And the thing that kids are most worried about is the same thing that they've always been worried about: fitting in with everybody else. And they've made that so difficult, because if you have a cat in the room peeing in a litter box, but they're actually a person, you're just like, what is happening? How am I supposed to focus on my studies when this is going on over here? Or I just saw a thing last night where there was like a whole group of people that identify as dogs. They're just like canine people. I don't know. They were wearing the masks and they were barking. I was just like, I don't even know where I'm at right now. I don't know what's happening. And I don't even know what their agenda is. Like, what are you even trying to do? Like, you're on the side of the road and you're like a whole group of people just barking and howling, making what kind of statement? I'm not sure. But that's the confusion that people have come to, where nobody wants to be themselves anymore. Everybody wants to be something else.
So what do you think is the global agenda, like attached to all this stuff, like from the top? Do you think it's depopulation? Do you think it's to take God out of everything? Like, what do you think it is?
I think in itself it's multifaceted. I think it's a combination of transhumanism, where they're trying to create some kind of a strange idea of what humanity is. It doesn't have gender. It doesn't have a specific race or any kind of identity. We're all kind of just one collective drone species. I think that's what's moving towards in transhumanism. Mm-hmm. There's that. There's depopulation at the same time. There's destroying of the nuclear family. There's so many things going on all at once. And it's so much so that we see, like you spoke about education. What is this? Why is this in education? It should be about maths and literacy and science and sport and things that used to be traditionally education. We're starting to see the rewriting of history. I don't know if you're aware of this. It was earlier this year, archaeologists uncovered a Viking burial, and it happened just so to be a woman with a sword, and they made this huge big social science elaboration that this was a transgender woman because they had a sword, but they're completely dismissing the idea that there were shield maidens and female warriors in Norse culture.
Right.
So they're rewriting aspects of history to suit their agenda as it is. So if you're going that far, as well as the social impact of changing people's genders and removing the rights of families to protect and raise their kids, it's got to be a big, big thing going on. Has to be.
Yeah.
And all this stuff is going to tie together at some point. All of these different, like you said, the Black agenda and all of this stuff is going to tie together. But I think people are just so head down, looking at their phones, not looking around, not talking to people. Definitely not talking to people across the world. That's right.
Well, I would probably get called a Christian extremist for this, but there's one particular pagan god that is both genders, and that should be alarming for anyone. I think that's it. That's the model.
It really should. Yeah. Well, when you really step back and you can talk about spirituality and you can talk about politics and you can talk about these things, that's when you start making all the connections, right? This is why they don't want you to pay attention or talk about it. This is why you're distracted with movies and music and television and all these things, is because when you do start paying attention, there's a lot of things that start matching up and you're like, wait a minute, one of these things is not like the other. And you begin to put all these things together to where now you can almost see their agenda as clearly as they do. Now, you may not believe any of it, but you can see it, and you're walking down that path of like, okay, this leads to this, and that makes sense, and this leads to this. And if you're trying to kill out the human race or completely depopulate it, why don't you like humans? And who is it that doesn't like humans?
Right. And does it go back to like the idea of eugenics, where they're trying to make a master race of people that are perfect, that have, they look a certain way, they have certain physical characteristics. Like, I mean, that's been around forever, honestly. Like, it's really not even that surprising that they're trying to do this, but
it's almost like they're trying to build a system of techno-feudalism where whatever's been going on with the jibby-jabbies in the last 3 years, and it was a mass experiment even on their own accord, because they didn't know what to do, and they rolled it out anyway. Is this just some kind of a grand experiment so they could find out how to extend their own lives while creating a serf class that's going to be below them? We're going back to what ancient Europe had at one point. There's going to be a serfdom and a high class, and the middle class will be completely wiped out. There won't be a middle class. It kind of goes to the Aldous Huxley's Brave New World analogy, where you have the alphas, the betas, all in one world, but the lower echelons, they have to live on the fringes of society and do the bidding of the masters. We're seeing that in real time.
Yes.
Right.
You know, art replicates or can predict the future, and I think that's done intentionally. Either they're seeding these ideas so we're not overly shocked by it later on, or they're blatantly just telling us what their playbook is.
Yeah.
And people just look at it as entertainment, which it is. It's entertaining, but I don't think people ever really step outside the box. Like Rick always calls The Matrix a documentary. He's like, it's not a movie, it's a documentary. They're telling us what they're doing.
Yeah. My favorite part is that part where the little rat guy, what's his name? I can't remember. Mouse. He makes that woman in the dress, you know, and Neo's, I don't know if you've seen it. Hopefully you have. Neo's walking by and he sees this woman in the red dress and he's like, you like that? I made that, you know, and that's exactly it. Look at this very distracting thing, because I don't want you to pay attention to the fact that you're in a mind cage that you can't get out of. And in the mind cage, a lot of people think when I say that I'm talking like you're somewhere else, like they are in the Matrix in a thing. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your mind being completely controlled by the propaganda all around you to where you don't even know what you think, because you only follow the agenda. That's it. You only follow what the people tell you because you don't actually think for yourself. But the moment that you do start thinking for yourself, you're not allowed to, because that's when an agent shows up and they start putting you back in your place. And it's apropos of what's going on right now. You see it everywhere. And I think, you know, talking to somebody from across the pond that is going through the same things over there in Australia is very telling, because this isn't just America, guys. This is a full global agenda. They've got their hands in everything. We've talked about the Vatican. We've talked about the City of London. We've talked about Washington, D.C. and how it's all connected. You see all these celebrities throwing up their hand signals and doing their things. Like, they're all involved, and we should not be worshiping them because they have a lot of money and they're on this magical screen on your wall. Like, that doesn't give them the authority to tell you how to live your life. We need to take back our own sovereignty, our own autonomy. And I like what you said earlier about how, you know, we don't really live our own lives. We kind of just do our own thing based on what they tell us. Because if you know the difference between admiralty law and common law, you know that common law is more of a natural law, which is where we all just kind of leave each other alone. That's what you were saying before. You have good morals. You don't want to hurt anybody. You just want to do your own thing. If somebody kills your cow, that's on them. There's going to be repercussions for that, but it's not going to be a big deal. You just make it right and you get back to life. Whereas in maritime law, everything goes before a judge. Everything is, and if you can place the judges and you can make the judges rule in your favor, then you have a messed up system. And that's exactly what we have all over the world. We have this messed up system where we don't get to choose where we go or what we do. We're not even allowed to. They tell us. And if we get out of line, we got to go before a judge. And who's the judge? Well, he works for them. So good luck. Yeah, it's just weird.
This is I have a bit of an issue when it comes to common law and the maritime law conversation, because I appreciate it, I understand it, and I get the reasoning behind it. But at the end of the day, you could go into a court with your backing of common law, and you can 100% prove yourself to be true, to be factual, to be in the right. You've got that. Yes. The system's in place to knock you down. At the end of the day, the system has a monopoly on violence. And Australia saw that during COVID. When we had our emergency powers put in place, that actually broke a whole heap of our constitutional rights in Australia. Not that our constitution has as much teeth as your guys does, but we had our rights broken.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter that they were broken, because when people protested, they rolled out the violence. They knocked us down with the state. They used militarized police force, LRADs, 12-gauge beanbag rounds, rubber bullets. Thankfully, they didn't go up to Full Metal Jacket. But the idea is the system's always got violence on its side as its last card. It's its final card. It's got the warning card. Like, yeah, watch out. If you go out of line, we've got this for you. But I can see that they're trying to police speech now. I think there's such a big movement in people talking about their rights, like common law and the failures of the current systems we've got. They're trying to get ahead of that. Like the Restrict Act was spoken about at the start of the year within the United States. Australia has its own version of that coming through called a Misinformation and Disinformation Bill. Essentially, it's going to police social media platforms to police speech, and it will be one governing person in a body within Australia that will determine what the truth is. So if this governing body says the sky is purple, and I make a post that says the sky is blue with a photo of a blue sky, I myself could be fined hundreds of thousands of dollars or face 12 months in prison. Now, by the looks of it, this will get up and it will go ahead in Australia. That's how horrifying this stuff is.
Yeah.
We're
and
in a time where... Yeah, we're in a time now where people pushed back enough during COVID and people have kind of unintentionally put themselves into camps and they've drawn a line, and now the system sees where those people are, and we're a lot easier to target now. They've spotted where the free thinkers are, the freedom lovers are, the people who question the system, and now they're pushing with the next stage. Control speech, control what the truth is, then you can do anything because you've got that monopoly on violence to back it up. Which, unfortunately, people in our community, like America's got a history of it against standing against tyrants, but people are very afraid and unwilling to admit that the only way these things change is to go down the routes of revolutions and those types of things. I'm not proposing that myself in this podcast, but I'm saying the historical precedence says that's the only way you overthrow tyrants and dictatorships.
Yeah. Well, you guys got your guns taken away a long time ago, right?
Yeah, we had them heavily regulated. We still have firearms, just not to the level and the accessibility that we used to. In Australia, in my state, you have to have be either a primary producer like a farmer, a hunter, or a recreational sports shooter. I tick two of those boxes, thankfully, so I have firearms for hunting purposes and clay shooting, which is great. But you can't just own a firearm. We don't have a right of self-defense in Australia. We can't just have a right to bear arms. It has to be based around sports or an intended use.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And a lot of people talk about America and the fact that, if you were to have this civil war, which nobody is proposing by any means, but if you were to have this civil war, it would be terrible because you'd have a bunch of people that have been indoctrinated fighting another group of people that have been indoctrinated. You know what I mean? It's like you have this weird thing where it's like, I have a lot of friends and I've talked to a lot of people that are like, the only way we're going to get this done is if we just get our guns. And just like, bro, hold on a second. Like, we all have to realize that we've all been lied to, like all of us. And we all need to realize that if we're fighting each other, that's exactly what they want. And so I don't personally think that civil war is the answer, but I do think that standing up, like you're seeing a lot of mothers and fathers going into the school boards and actually standing up and saying, paying attention now, actually doing things. People are running for office that never ran before because they were just like, nah. But now they're actually running for office and they're trying to make change the legal way. And as you said, it's an uphill battle because it's always about control. But people are actually starting to do things. And even if it's just podcasts like we're doing or posting online or making things known to the masses, this is a huge deal. We have to talk. We have to think for ourselves, and we can't just sit around and act like it's going to change. Like, that's insanity. It's not going to change.
I've often thought this as a potential outcome. If they go down the route of policing speech and policing what the truth is, naturally they're going to go after people straight away, push back. People will be put in prison, people will be fined. When does the momentum get to a point where you see the average mother of three down the road who's just a stay-at-home mum, lovely person, the community knows her, the police knock on her door and arrest her for a Facebook post? How many times does that happen before the broader majority of the population pushes back? And this is what makes me think maybe they're intentionally doing this, so that there are civil conflicts, so that there are insurrections and these things happen. Do they want that destruction so they can rebuild after the fact? Are they playing us the whole time and we just don't realize it?
Yeah.
Possible. Yep.
It's a great point. And I think that, if you walk that line, as you just did, and you continue to walk it, I mean, you can get the depopulation agenda, you can get these people to take care of themselves just by just stirring up some rumors, arrest this lady, do this, and then everybody's fighting everybody. And yeah, it's very scary, the time that we're living in, and the point that I always like to make is there isn't a reason to live in fear, because I feel like sometimes fear is what got us into this in the first place, right? We're afraid to be beaten by the society around us. We're afraid to go to court. We're afraid to get pulled over. We're afraid of everything. I know a lot of people, they go into their doctor's office and they're afraid to even ask their doctor for something, or like he doesn't work for you. Like, he works for you. You should ask him for whatever you want. You should tell him what you want him to do, what tests to run, that's on you. But people are so afraid to just talk to their doctor because they think that he's in control, because that's how
we had to do.
Set it
remember, so last year, we have a 6-year-old, so he was in kindergarten, and we didn't want him to be vaccinated anymore. And so we had to sit down and take a class on basically why we should vaccinate them and why we're putting them in harm's way by not vaccinating them. And we had to get issued a certificate that we then took to the school and presented to them, like, yeah, we know that we're going to probably kill our kid by doing this, but we want to do this anyway. And I'm like, well, needless to say, we're not doing public school anymore with him. But I was just like, it was flabbergasting to me that we had to do all of that just to have him continue to go to public school.
Yeah, it sounds like to me, now this is my little tinfoil hat conspiracy mind going, they were putting you through that situation so that they had a paper trail to show that, and I'm not saying this, that from their perspective, they have a paper trail to say that you're a neglectful parent. And we're starting to see that terminology being used in homeschooling now. It's not just in the States, it's across the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they don't want mums and dads teaching their kids. They want their kids in the system somehow. There's a little term being thrown around in academia called educational neglect. And the idea is that if your child's not getting a sanctioned, approved education from the state or from private institutions, that's a form of neglect. And what happens if these misinformation, disinformation bills, these restrict acts go through and they find you're teaching your child something that they don't approve of to be real? That's another level, another layer of things that they can use against you. It's this beast system is being built around us, and I don't think people realise we're currently the brick's up to our neck at the moment. We're about to be walled in and no one seems to notice.
Right.
Yeah.
And what is it going to take for people to realise that this is happening?
Their rights being taken away.
Yeah. Their kids being taken away.
If that's happening over there, we know it's coming here. Right.
Yeah.
So
America's in that interesting place where, because you have such a strong constitution that's very black and white, you have a Bill of Rights. Our country does not have a Bill of Rights. We don't have a freedom of speech. We have implied freedoms, which is very dangerous when you look at legalese language. America has the backing behind it for that. You have a Second Amendment that helps protect the First Amendment. The funny thing with the states is you've got individual states which are pushing against what your constitutional rights are. And for me, the only way America forward, I don't necessarily think America's going to go into a second civil war. I don't think that will happen. What I can see happening is the balkanization of the United States. You might have localized areas that are self-autonomous countries, like California and the West Coast states might form their own union. You might have the Appalachians and smaller areas that have their own state. You can see those lines being drawn up. People throughout COVID left those Democrat states and they went to freedom states. So we're almost seeing population moves now that we've seen historically, like when Texas was taken over from the Spanish. A lot of Anglo-Americans moved into Texas, and that was the catalyst for becoming a part of the United States. Well, we're kind of seeing that now in demographic shifts of political ideology in the States. Florida, for example. Florida is probably going to be the first one that I think would secede from the rest of the United States.
Yeah,
I never thought of it that way. It almost is like breaking off into different factions, like in the Hunger Games, where they have the different districts, and I don't know. It just seems very. I don't know.
And again, it seems very much like they put out in media. It's very much a Hunger Games analogy, right? Where you've got different districts, and each district's responsible for certain things. So it's the playbook is there. They put it out in mass media, in film and cinema, and it's really just a foretelling of what's coming.
Right. I think so too. I think that far more is revealed in movies and in music and in the entertainment industry than people give them credit for.
Yeah. Well, this has been an awesome conversation, man. We would love to do this again. We want to be respectful of your time, and we try to keep things as close as we can to an hour. We're over now, but that's fine. We love talking with you. We had a great time. I hope that you would want to come on again, because we can go on your podcast. We just love having conversations with people. Tell everybody where they can find you. I hear your podcast is everywhere, so.
It is. All the usual podcatchers, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, Apple, everywhere. You're Missing the Point podcast. It's MISSEN. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. I am heavily shadow banned, search banned, and suggestion banned. So if you can find me, you're one of the very lucky people who can. We'll definitely have to do this again, guys. You'll have to come jump on my show and keep the conversation going.
We would love it.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Well, man, stay strong over there. I know there's a lot coming at you, and thanks again for just coming on and sharing what's going on your side of the world. Keep pushing, brother. We know that getting the information out is probably one of the best things that we can do. So just keep having conversations. And until next time, stay fringy, my friends. We'll see you on the next. Bye.
See ya.